All right, let's dive into a fantastic story about how programming evolves. We're going to look at a super common, kind of tricky problem that went from this really manual, kind of clunky solution to a beautiful one-line fix. This is the story of dispatch once evolving into static let.
So think about this for a second. You're building an app, right? And you've got this one thing, maybe a settings manager, that needs to be used all over the place. The catch? You can only ever have one of them. But what if two different parts of your app try to create it at the exact same moment? You could get two managers, which would be chaos, or even worse, your app could just crash. So how do you prevent that?
Well, this whole idea has a name. It's a classic design pattern called the singleton. And the name really says it all. You get a single instance, and everyone has to share it. It's a really fundamental concept for managing these kinds of shared resources, and it's at the heart of our story today.
Now, the really tricky part of this whole thing is that phrase, at the exact same time. In any modern app, you have dozens of things or threads running all at once. If all those threads decide to create that one settings manager, well, you get what we call a race condition. It's like a free-for-all, and you have no idea what the outcome will be. Preventing that chaos is the real challenge here.
To really appreciate how simple things are now, we've got to jump in our time machine and go back to the days of Objective-C. You know, the language that built the very first iPhone apps. Back then, developers had a very specific and, honestly, a very powerful tool to solve this exact problem.
And that tool was called dispatch once. It came from Apple's concurrency framework, and it did exactly what you'd guess from the name. It made sure a chunk of code ran only one single time, period. You could have 100 threads all trying to run it at once, but only the very first one would get through. The other 99, they'd just wait patiently until it was done. Pretty clever.
And here is what that looked like in the actual code. You can see it's a bit much. It uses this special little variable called a once token that basically acts like a key to a locked door. The dispatch once function checks the door. If it's unlocked, it lets one thread in to create our manager, and then it locks the door and throws away the key forever. It's a really smart but totally manual way to make sure everything is safe.
And look, let's be clear, this method was absolutely rock solid. It worked. It guaranteed thread safety, it stopped race conditions dead in their tracks, and for many, many years, it was the gold standard. It was just a whole lot of ceremony for what feels like a simple idea, you know?
But then, Swift arrived. And Swift took a look at this whole pattern and basically asked, hey, this is a super common problem. What if the language just handled this for you? What if all of this manual boilerplate could just go away?
And this is the answer. That's it. That is the entire thing. One single line. All of that code, the token, the special function, it all gets replaced by this simple declaration. It's a perfect example of what makes modern Swift so powerful. Taking these complex, error-prone patterns and just building a safe, simple solution right into the language itself.
So how on earth does one line do all of that work? Well, it's pretty brilliant. First, it's lazy. That My Manager instance isn't even created until the very first time somebody actually needs it. Second, because it's a let constant, the language guarantees it can only be set one time. And third, and this is the real magic, Swift itself guarantees this whole process is thread safe. It does all the locking and checking behind the scenes for you so you don't even have to think about it. The difference is pretty huge, right? But nothing makes it clearer than just putting them side by side. Okay, look at this. On the left, you've got the old way. Manual state management, a token you have to keep track of, a special block. It's a whole process. And on the right, you have the Swift way, a single clear statement of what you want. The big deal here isn't just that it's shorter. It's safer. It's safer because there are just fewer places to make a mistake. It's easier to read, it's easier to understand, and it's pretty much impossible to get wrong. You know, this whole thing is about more than just a better way to write a singleton. It's really a story about the philosophy behind modern programming languages. The goal is to push all that complex, error-prone stuff down into the language itself, so that we, the developers, can just focus on building cool features.
So, what's the bottom line? Dispatch once was the essential tool for this job back in the day. But today, static let is the right way, the safe way, the simple way to do it in Swift. In fact, dispatch once is now officially deprecated, so you really shouldn't be using it in new Swift code anyway. And understanding this history, why the old way existed, and what problems the new way solves is what helps you build better, safer apps.
This is just one example of this amazing trend in language design. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about.
What other complex, messy problems from your past have been totally solved by the modern languages that you're using today? It's pretty cool to think about. Thanks for tuning in.